all the variables that you would not want when conducting an operation like this are all stacked against, in this case, the Israeli Defense Force. Their two aims, first of all, to rescue the hostages, which we now believe are up to 199, and also the Israeli government stated aim of neutralizing Hamas, 30,000 terrorists. The challenge is, first of all, it's a very small area, 25 miles by about 8 miles, very heavily built up, a lot of high-rise buildings. And secondly, they're thought to be 2.2 million civilians in the area as well. And the Hamas terrorists will be hiding in buildings, hiding amongst the civilian population. And also there's a vast array of tunnels under the Gaza, stretching for many, many miles, where Hamas will be. And maybe that's where the hostages are as well. Fighting underground is really the most challenging thing that can be done, although Israel does have some experts in this particular type of warfare. One of the really horrific things, certainly frightens me no end, is the likely tunnel fighting that's going to happen in Gaza, because I assume that the hostages and a number of the Hamas fighters will be in the tunnels. Anybody who's read any of the accounts of the tunnel fighting in the Vietnam War and the horrific activity of crawling around in small holes in the dark, sometimes many hundreds of feet underground, is just horrific. Although the Israelis do have specialist trained people to do this, the Hamas fighters will know those tunnels inside out. No doubt they'll be booby-trapped. No doubt there'll be fighters waiting around every corner, as it were. But these are very extensive tunnels covering, many, many miles, many different tunnels. And the Israelis are going to have to clear them all to make sure that they've got everybody. So it is a horrific prospect in place, and takes very, very brave men and women to operate in that environment. Let's hope that they get on with it, get it done quickly. But it is something that I'm sure when it's all over and the stories come out about it will amaze and terrify people, as the stories of the fighting in the tunnels in Vietnam did and still does to those who read up on them. It will be very difficult to identify who the terrorists are. They're not going to be wearing uniforms or badges with Hamas written on them. So basically, Israeli Defense Forces need to go in and comb virtually every inch of ground in Gaza to hunt down the terrorists, who are not going to be making life easy. And because there's so many civilians around, the chances of civilian casualties are very high. And because of the type of things that the Israeli Defense Force will have to do, search every building, some of these high-rise buildings, are many floors high, they'll be booby-trapped. There will be fighters, around the corner. So there is only a certain amount that modern military technology will get you in this sort of fight. At the end of the day, it's going to be the men and women of the IDF virtually fighting hand-to-hand with the Hamas militant terrorist fighters. And because it is so difficult, because it's so challenging, that is why it will be brutal. It could well be bayonets fixed and people literally fighting in very, very close proximity. And when it comes to fighting underground in the dark, it is horrific, even just thinking about it. But the practicalities themselves make it even more devastating and dangerous. So in this sort of street warfare, and I saw a little bit of it in Syria back in sort of 2017, 2018, in places like Aleppo, where rubble is everywhere. People are hiding, in cellars and underground. And it is just a horrific way. And I'm sure everybody is trying to reduce civilian casualties. But with so many people around, undoubtedly people will get caught in the crossfire, will get caught in airstrikes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not something that's going to happen very quickly. it's going to take weeks rather than days. And sadly, there will be a lot of casualties, I expect, on both sides. The Israeli Defense Force have really put together a comprehensive package, I think, for their movement into Gaza. Everybody will have seen the hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles. Israeli tanks are absolutely first rate. The Makoa tank, very, very capable. They'll also be supported by masses of drones. I think everybody's seen the effect drones have had in the war in Ukraine. Again, Israel is actually has always been one of the leading manufacturers and producers of military drones. So they'll have no shortage of those. But actually, this street fighting is about soldiers on the ground, boots on the ground. And people will have seen the 400,000 or so Israeli men and women who are getting ready for the fight, and they're going to be absolutely key to it. It is very difficult for the Israeli government to do anything else. Their aim, number one, is to rescue the 199 hostages that Hamas has taken. Now, this is incredibly difficult. This will be a number of special forces operations, I expect, to try and hunt down these hostages and rescue them. And there have already been a few of these type rescues, but they are incredibly difficult and incredibly dangerous. The second aim of the Israeli government is to neutralize Hamas, 30,000 fighters hiding amongst 2 million people. It is absolutely the most challenging and difficult operation. And I'm sure if it wasn't absolutely necessary, nobody would want it to be done. There doesn't seem to be any other way to achieve Israel's aims than actually put boots on the ground in Gaza to do it. It's highly unlikely that the Palestinians in Gaza are going to hand over Hamas, and it's highly unlikely that Hamas are going to surrender. Their backers, Iran, have armed them very well. They appear to be very well trained. So, yeah, this is a terrible option the Israeli government have to take, but with their stated aims, it's very difficult to see how they could do it any other way. I think that they will be able to kill or capture most of the Hamas fighters. However, of course, some will remain, and the ideology of Hamas, no doubt, will remain as well. So physically, I'm sure Israel government can neutralize Hamas, these terrorist fighters in the Gaza, but there will need to be follow-up operations, follow-up activity, not least humanitarian activity to feed and water the millions of Palestinians left there. Now, hopefully, once this is done, the world can go back to the diplomatic and political table and work out a solution to what has been a intractable problem really since the end of the Second World War. But if anything, any good comes out of this, it might well be some sort of peaceful solution where the Palestinians and the Israelis can live in close proximity without the fear of fighting and death around every corner. So the chance for this to grow larger than a war in Israel is very real at the moment and must be avoided. The fact that the US have sent a very powerful naval fleet to the Eastern Mediterranean, and the fact that the UK is sending a number of warships as deterrents to Iran and Russia and Hezbollah must be the right way to do this. It may even be that I've written in a number of articles this week that the UK and the US might have to put boots on the ground to prevent potentially Hezbollah or other terror groups coming into Israel. Hopefully that will not be needed. Hopefully the threat from the US and the UK will be enough. But that would be a disaster, not just regionally, but for the whole globe, if this develops into a Middle Eastern conflict involving a whole bunch of nations.